Well, hello YouTube. And I had mentioned that I had found some VHS videotapes pertaining to the Des Moines Steel Company. And this will be the first one. It was received by my father on May 28th, 1992. And I believe this was a gift that was handed out to the employees because it has his name is printed on a label on the end of the sleeve. But here is the tape. See if we can get it to focus here. It's called Spanning A Century, Des Moines Incorporated, and it's 12 minutes and 43 seconds in hi-fi stereo. So, let's give it a play.
For more than 100 years, our company has been a pioneer in the engineering, fabrication, and construction of a wide range of heavy custom steel products. Our history is about meeting new challenges, of being a leader in technology, and an innovator in our industry. From building our first all-steel elevated water tank in Scranton, Iowa, to designing and fabricating thermal vacuum chambers for simulating outer space. We've carried on a proud tradition of innovation, spanning a century. PDM, Des Moines Incorporated. In the late 1800s, Americans were moving west, seeking new opportunities. Settlers were claiming acreage through the Homestead Act's farmland grants. As the railroads pushed the frontier further westward, small towns were springing up throughout the Midwest. In the 1890s, most of these Midwestern towns were largely undeveloped and lacked municipal water systems. This growing need for waterworks spelled opportunity for two civil engineers fresh out of Iowa State College. Their first project together was to design and lay out a water system for the town of Boone, Iowa. The two former classmates, William H. Jackson and Berkeley N. Moss, formed a partnership in 1892 that would eventually become the company we know today as PDM. But in its early days, the Jackson and Moss partnership had very humble beginnings.
What I'm reading here is a diary from my father's handwriting. W.H. Jackson's CE, meaning civil engineer, arrived in Fort Madison January 3rd, 93 at 9:30 a.m. with no money in the pocket or in the bank. But I have $300 worth of instruments and 1 month's salary due me of $75. This instrument fell into his hands, I suppose given to him by his father. And so when he went for his first job in Fort Madison, Iowa, this is perhaps the only piece of equipment that he took with him to Fort Madison, Iowa. And when a classmate of his in 1892 decided that they wanted to go into business with each other, they started out their business with practically no money, but they had at least a $300 instrument to begin business.
The partnership's early engineering and construction jobs were wooden tanks for waterworks projects in Iowa and surrounding states. In 1897, in Scranton, Iowa, Jackson and Moss erected their first all-steel tank. Today, almost a century later, the steel tower and 40,000-gallon steel tank are still in service. In 1900, Jackson and Moss joined forces with Edward Crellin, who owned a small fabricating shop in Des Moines. The company created by this merger was named the Des Moines Bridge and Iron Company. With Crellin's fabricating plant, William H. Jackson began selling projects in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, the Dakotas, and Minnesota, as well as Iowa. By 1903, the company was recognized as a leader not only in waterworks, but in roof trusses, products for power plants, and structural steel for buildings and bridges. In the early 1900s, the price of steel was based on the Pittsburgh Plus formula, meaning the price of steel at Pittsburgh plus freight to the point of delivery. For the Des Moines Bridge and Iron Works, this pricing disadvantage made it difficult to compete in the growing markets in the eastern half of the U.S. Looking ahead to expand into these new markets, Crellin and Jackson purchased land for a plant near Pittsburgh on Neville Island. With easy river transportation and the price advantage of being close to the steel supply, the Pittsburgh plant grew rapidly. By 1915, the company had built more than 1,200 water towers and standpipes in 43 states and 8 foreign countries. The growing company reorganized in 1916 with a new name that reflected the increasing importance of the Pittsburgh plant, Pittsburgh Des Moines Steel Company. The dramatic growth of the railroad industry had created a huge new market for PDM's expertise in water systems. From about 1910 to 1930, PDM constructed more than 1,000 elevated railroad tanks. World War I created new demands for the growing company's expertise. To help the Allied forces improve communications, PDM constructed and erected a series of radio towers in France, more than 800 feet tall, at that time the highest in the world. PDM also supplied fabricated steel for Liberty ships and other wartime vessels. The Great Depression put countless Americans out of work and countless companies out of business. But PDM survived. Through agencies such as the Works Progress Administration, federal funds were put into public works, including waterworks projects. For PDM, that meant water tanks. There was also work for PDM during the Depression constructing Louisiana highway bridges and pipeline suspension bridges. From the beginning, PDM has always looked for new challenges. In 1936, PDM built the country's first pressurized wind tunnel. Our success with wind tunnels has grown ever since. More than 65% of America's wind tunnels were constructed by PDM. The Second World War put PDM into the shipbuilding business. The U.S. government needed PDM's leadership in engineering and building heavy steel products to construct floating dry docks. We also built destroyer escorts for the war effort. From wind tunnels and thermal vacuum chambers to water tanks of all shapes and sizes, Pitt Des Moines has built a solid foundation of experience, taking on new challenges in engineering, fabrication, and construction. Guiding our company's dynamic growth and progress for more than 50 years, William R. Jackson's leadership has carried on the tradition of innovation begun by his father.
I think the strength has been the combination of the skills of different people working together. We've been an extremely strong company engineering-wise. Our engineers have developed skills that they could utilize, and the salesman would go out and find a problem, and then they'd come back to the engineering department, how can we do this? And the sales department working with the engineering department, I remember so well. And it was that cooperation between the sales and the engineering department that I think brought many successes to us in our line of business, in our developing new business. And that's the thing I would emphasize. We were always looking for something new.
Our ability to meet new challenges has led to some landmark achievements. For the World Trade Center, we fabricated the three-pronged panels that give the towers their distinctive lines. Each panel is 56 feet long and weighs 55 tons. Our expertise in custom fabrication can also be seen in the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California. Most of the 30,000 tons of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland, was fabricated and erected by PDM. With a span of more than 9,000 feet, it's the longest bridge of its kind in the country. We built the containment vessel for the nation's first commercial nuclear power plant. Our thermal vacuum chambers were used by NASA to test the lunar rover and the spacesuits used by our astronauts. But the structure that remains the symbol of PDM's tradition of innovation is the Jefferson National Memorial Arch in St. Louis. Standing 630 feet high and weighing nearly 5,000 tons, the St. Louis Arch is truly a towering achievement.
Watching how our people worked together and did the planning so successfully without any hitches was, I thought, a thrilling experience for me to raise the structure with the combination of derricks that would go up the outside of the arch while it was being built, and being able to lift themselves by their own bootstraps all the way to the top. It was a very unique, ingenious way, very economical, but to be down on the ground and see that last piece go up into place with the American flag on it was a real thrill.
Today, Pitt Des Moines is securely positioned for continued growth in the design, fabrication, and construction of municipal water storage tanks and industrial processing, refinery, and storage facilities. In high technology markets, PDM has earned a reputation of excellence in specialty engineered products, such as low temperature and cryogenic systems, aerospace, high vacuum and thermal test facilities, anaerobic wastewater treatment systems, and supercritical fluid extraction facilities. As the nation begins the work of improving its deteriorating infrastructure, PDM is serving the market for new bridge fabrication, bridge rehabilitation, and elevated transit bridges. In bridge fabrication, we remain an industry leader. In steel construction, we also continue to fabricate and erect structural steel for high-rise and low-rise buildings for commercial, industrial, institutional, and municipal customers. PDM's steel service centers provide warehousing, first-stage processing, and distribution of steel products for customers in the fabrication, construction, logging, mining, and agricultural industries. Ours is a history of meeting new challenges, of being a leader in technology, and an innovator in our industry. These are the traditions we continue with pride into our second century.
One thing I would say about PDM, we never hesitated to try something new. And we have grown, and we're still growing, and we'll keep on growing.
We're continuing a tradition of pioneering, spanning a century. PDM, Pitt Des Moines Incorporated.